Right Honourable John McDonnell, Labour MP for Hayes and Harlington, West London. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be interviewed. You have been an MP since 1997 and a Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer for 5 years from 2015 to 2020. But for many of our viewers and listeners, they would be interested to know that you're also the chairman of the Solidarity with the Workers' Movement in Iran group. Can you please explain to us what this group is all about and why have you accepted its chairmanship?
Okay. There are a number of us, both members of Parliament and active members of the labour and trade union movement in the UK, who have taken an interest in Iran and what's been happening there over many years. And we've, from time to time, when there's, for example, been an industrial dispute, when strike action has been taken by a trade union in Iran, we've lent solidarity support, making statements in support, trying to link up with the individual trade union and the trade unionists themselves, and then also raising cases when repression has taken place and people have been arrested and imprisoned purely and simply because they've tried to exercise some basic trade union or labour rights. But that work has been intermittent. It hasn't been consistent. It's been when crises occur, people rally around and offer what support they can. But there was a view that was emerging in recent years. There needed to be some form, organisational form, that brought us together to enable us to engage more consistently in supporting progressive struggles in Iran. And then the uprising occurred, and that put even more importance on people come together. So a number of us came together. There was a representative group of individual MPs, individual trade unionists, and some trade unions themselves who have taken policy decisions on these matters, and a number of progressive campaigners in this country as well with Iranian connection. And we decided that we needed to have a more consistent approach, and to do that, the best organisational form was to set up a solidarity committee, which is a usual method that we've used. We've done that, exactly as you said, over South Africa. We've done it over a whole range of campaigns, and global campaigns, where we've linked up with fellow trade unionists and fellow socialist and labour movement activists. So we set it up a couple of years ago. We've organised a number of events. The most important thing for initially was to support the uprisings that were taking place and offer whatever support we could vocally in this country, so people became more aware of what was happening. So we've organised briefing meetings at the House of Commons, the Parliament, for MPs and for others, anyone who in the labour movement who'd be interested, and try and ensure that people are aware of what's happening. Also trying to get across the level of oppression that's taking place. The interesting thing is that we try to appeal to trade unionists in particular, because I think there was a lack of information and knowledge about the level of the suppression of trade union rights in Iran. And when people understand, and when we explain it to people, I think people are quite shocked and therefore are willing to mobilise. So what we've been doing is holding briefing sessions in Parliament. We've then held joined various demonstrations that have taken place, marches, held public meetings as well. We've also tried to ensure that we have a presence at a number of trade union conferences, and because our trade unions are largely affiliated with the Labour Party, at Labour Party conference as well, just engaging with people to raise the level of consciousness about what's going on. We're trying to encourage individual trade unions here to link up with workers in Iran whenever they can. So if they, for example, when the Tehran bus drivers dispute was on, there was quite a lot of activity we undertook in expressing solidarity with the strike at that point in time years ago. So that was an example of what can be done. So if we can link up individual trade unions with particular trade unions in Iran within their particular sector, and there's a greater understanding then between those trade unions about what they're facing. It's that sort of thing. More recently, I have to say, a lot of the concerns that have been expressed to us has been about the suppression during the uprising, but the physical attacks and the death sentences that have been issued. So again, wherever we can, we've tried to highlight within the labour and trade union movement here the incidences and then what they can do as much to put pressure on the UK government to be raising these issues with Iran as well, because we think the UK government needs to be doing more, and it's been too passive on some of these issues and not highlighted. We don't think internationally what's going on, but also how one government can form alliances with others, particularly because we're a European state across Europe, about what we can do in our government working together to put pressure on Iran. So that's the background to the genesis of the organisation itself. We're hoping in this coming year that we can build more support amongst trade unionists, but we've got a general election coming up in this country. So again, it gives us a vehicle to raise issues within the Labour Party in particular, and trade unions affiliated to the Labour Party and beyond, as we go into that general election. And there's an opportunity now putting Iran on as an agenda item in that election debate.
You mentioned South Africa and protests by workers and laborers in various sectors in Iran, as you mentioned, including teachers, bus drivers, truck drivers, retirees, gold merchants, oil and gas employers, have been going on for many years. But these protests really have not attracted much support from trade unions to now. Especially compared to the support they gave to the anti-apartheid movement during, for South Africa. Why has the situation in Iran, why hasn't it become a cause for our time?
First of all, let me say, I think it's a bit shaming that it hasn't attracted that level of support. We've been trying to explain to people exactly that. Do they know about the scale of repression that's taking place? And what we're finding is a combination of, first of all, ignorance. There hasn't really been a focus on the issue for a long period of time. It isn't just within the labour and trade union movement. I think it's across the media in this country as well. There's almost like a turning a blind eye to some of the issues that are going on, almost though there's not much we can do, there's not much we can affect, there's almost insuperable problems. And we're trying to give confidence to people, so actually you can. No matter how small an effort you make, you will have an impact. If only an expression of solidarity, it will encourage people in Iran. And when the uprising occurred, people realized, well, there is potential here of actually change in the future. The second thing, whereas in South Africa in particular, there are organizational forms in South Africa itself, even though they were undercover to a certain extent, that the labour and trade union movement could link up with here. There hasn't been that level of organizational form either in Iran that people have been able to consistently link up with. And I think that most probably relates to the level of repression. So every time someone stands up, they're then imprisoned, that sort of thing. So that's one element of it. But the other element, and that's what we're trying to do now, really, we've woken up to the fact that there needs to be a better organizational form in this country to enable people to want to get information, then coalesce around particular actions within the labour and trade union movement. And so that's what we're trying to do. It's a bit of a hill to climb, but I think we're beginning to get there. I'll give you an example. We participated in the May Day March this year again. The May Day March is around the country, but the largest one is in London, the capital city. We've participated in that since we've formed in the last couple of years. This year, we had quite a large delegation, and it was interesting how many people on that march from other trade unions were coming up to us talking about the issue itself. So we're building. I think we are building. There's some contradictions in the past as well about people's attitude to the Iran regime. Sometimes there's almost as though, well, there's nothing that can be done, therefore ignore it, move on to other issues that might be more successful in changing what's happening on the ground. So again, there's been a lack of confidence, but I have to say, yeah, it is pretty shaming that we haven't done enough, and that's why we've come together.
A recent report by Reporters Without Borders talked about the transnational repression of the Islamic Republic, the regime. Here in the UK, a journalist was attacked. A foreign broadcaster had to leave UK, and there was also because of threats. And there was also a report by Policy Exchange about the Islamic centers that have been set up by the regime here in the UK, in London, spreading propaganda and spreading, anti-democratic, anti-secular, information and organizing. So what do you think? What is the Labour position regarding these activities? And a lot of activists and people inside Iran are asking for the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps to be prescribed. What is your position?
Well, let me take you through what's been happening. I'm the secretary of the National Union of Journalists Parliamentary Group. We have a group of MPs that represent the NUJ, the National Union of Journalists in Parliament. So we've been raising the issues in particular about the attacks on journalists and the attacks on media companies, media operations in this country for a number of years. People have woken up to the fact that it's got to dangerous levels. Up until recently, it's been relatively covert. The threats have been not particularly well reported, but the recent stabbing has just been appalling. That's woken people up to the threat that there is. That's the first thing. And as you say, one of the companies had to move abroad, and then they're back, they're operational. But at the same time, it was a wake-up call that the scale of operation that Iran was putting into suppression of media operations here. We've been raising it in Parliament consistently through the National Union of Journalists Parliamentary Group, and we've been raising it through our Solidarity Committee as well. The government has woken up to the fact, but they're still in a position where they're not willing to prescribe the Iranian Guard, the IRGC. And we've raised it consistently. The government argument is that it's just a bizarre argument that this is it's all part of the state and that we've never done it before. That's a ludicrous argument. We're saying that these are terrorists operating in our country. You should be suppressing them in the same way you would other terrorist organisations. So that's been our consistent line. I've been raising that. And as a large number of Labour MPs have as well. And I believe the Labour front bench position is the same. When they go into government, I think you will see action on this because we can't tolerate this sort of behaviour. The other issue as well related to that is the soft form of influence that's taking place as well, whereby the threats are there, the attacks on individual journalists, but also the, if you like, the dissemination of fake news, fake information. I think we've got to monitor that more closely and challenge that as much as we can. And again, the NUJ, the National Union of Journalists, has been doing that, as well as the Solidarity campaign. We're careful about not putting anyone in danger as well. So again, it's making sure the sources are properly protected. But it's a live issue, and I think it's a deeply serious issue that at last people have woken up to. Even this government now has woken up to the fact. But from the Labour and trade union movement itself, we've approached it on the basis this is solidarity with journalists who are members of our trade union, and in that way deserve those protections of their rights to free report. We've now, going into this general election, there will be a debate around security issues. Sometimes they've turned a blind eye to Iran because, again, they think the problems are insuperable. Now they've woken up to the fact that action has to be taken. There's always been a resistance to some statements around Iran thinking, well, maybe we'll make matters worse and you'll undermine what little relationship there is between Western governments and Iran. Well, I don't think there is a relationship anymore. How can you stand by and consider in any way that Iran can be a partner in any form of the future, or the existing regime can be a partner in any future? So that's why I think our argument will be, you've got to recognize this is an oppressive regime, and they're not just oppressing their own people, they're trying to oppress people in our own country, and therefore we have to stand firm.
And one of the repercussions of having an oppressive regime, and a regime that is mismanaging the resources of the country, is the number of people walking away and trying to get away from Iran. Yeah. And many of them end up as refugees here in the UK. With the Iranian refugees as being one of the highest number of groups of refugees in the UK. You've been involved with refugee matters for a long time. What can you tell us about, the status of Iranian refugees here, and what should they expect, from the British government?
First of all, the government here, the country is one of the first, well, actually it was the country that after the Second World War designed the Refugee Convention, which accepted that countries had a responsibility to accept refugees. In this recent period, particularly under this Conservative government, I don't believe that they've lived up to that convention effectively. And it's meant that we now have a system which is unwelcoming and at the same time extremely bureaucratic and I think harmful. So I'll just give the example of what we have in my own constituency. Large number of people try to seek refuge in this country through the procedures and routes that have been established by the government itself. Because they're so difficult to comply with, people will come here with whatever means they possibly can. And sometimes they'll come here without going through the existing system because it isn't working effectively. And they'll travel here and they'll be described by this government, certainly not by me, as illegal migrants. What then happens, and in my constituency, we have 2,000 asylum seekers in hotels in my constituency. The bulk of them, I think the figure is now nearly 90%, will eventually be accepted as refugees. But the process takes anything up to, well, some of them have been there 2 years in hotels waiting to. A lot of those will be Iranians. Their cases are absolutely clear. They've fled oppression and they've come here. Why have they come to the UK? Because there's an Iranian community here. They want to be with their family and friends. And if you look at them as well, I've met so many, the qualifications that they have, they'll make a huge contribution to our society and to our economy in particular. So what we've been trying to say to the government is, first of all, you need to accept your responsibilities more effectively. You need to make sure that the system is operating properly so that people don't have to come by these other routes. And when they're here, they should be processed more quickly to enable them to get into the economy, supporting themselves, etc. I'm quite angry at the way the process is operating at the moment. And I'm hoping that with a change of government, well, I know with a change of government, I think there'll be a more effective process that will then be supporting people. As I say, we've also tried to highlight in some instances to really shake up politicians in this country about what people are enduring over there. And one of the ways we've been doing that is sometimes taking highlighting one particular case. And we were involved in the Panahi campaign. The film directors, we used him as an example a number of years ago. You know, when he was leaving the country, going to the Berlin Film Festival to pick up an award, and then got arrested and then was in and out of prison, that sort of thing. So we're trying to use cases like that. Say, look, this is what people are enduring. So when they come here, of course they're coming here because they want to seek asylum. And again, the death sentence that's now been threatened against Tomasz Salheri, but the rapper, it's another example that we can use here to say, look, this is why people come here, because their lives are at risk. That's why they should be processed more quickly and accepted as refugees. And as I say, allowed to make their contribution in this country. I have to say also that I have to say for the Iranian community in the UK as well, they are anxious about the role the Iran government plays in the UK. And again, what we're trying to say to the government, and I think the Labour Party leadership understands this as well, that we need to be really careful about ensuring the safety of Iranians in this country as well, because the Islamic regime's tentacles are stretched right the way across, well, as we've seen Europe as well, and how they can harm people. So it's an alertness to the support that Iranians need in this country too.
Thank you so very much, Mr. McDonnell, again. And I hope we can have the pleasure of having you and interviewing you again